Okay. It's rolling. Alright. Why do we study stories?
Okay, here we go.
Why do we study stories in English? What's the point? Hit me with some words, some ideas.
Human experience.
Okay. What about human experience?
They reveal core aspects of the human experience.
Stories?
Yeah, stories.
Okay, so you're saying stories.
That's not how you spell experiences.
I was rushing it, bro. Experiences. Yeah, so I can prove that I can spell experiences properly. There. So stories do what? Reveal human experiences. Okay. And so when we study it, we study stories to learn about these experiences.
Yes.
Right. So here's us. We view these stories so we can then get these experiences. Okay. Any other ideas?
To escape your monotonous, boring daily life.
Okay, so we read stories not to just learn about these new experiences, but then to just experience them instead of your own life.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Okay, yeah. So escape. But then let's start thinking about why do we analyze stories? That's the next one. Analyze. Why do we do all these essays on it? Because you can escape into it, but an essay doesn't help that, right? So why do we get into it? Why do we analyze it? Break it down like that.
To look for deeper meanings.
Deeper meanings in
the story.
Yeah, deeper meanings in the story. So why do we want deeper meanings?
Because
why do you want deeper meanings in stories? What do you think? You can stop looking.
Because we can learn from them.
What do you think? Why do you want deeper meanings in stories?
To understand different perspectives.
Yeah, that's good. The reason why I like that is you use the word perspective. 1 point to him, 0 point to you.
Hey, Ray.
So we want deeper meanings so we can get different perspectives, right? So perspectives are kind of like experiences, except that they show a different perspective. Different perspective, which will then help with us with what? So they have different perspectives, yeah.
Our own experience.
Yeah, our own experiences, which helps us to expand our own experience, kind of thing, right? And so, I like that. This is a good idea. Now, I want to provide you with like an actual visual diagram that combines all of this together, so to help you understand it very easily. Okay. So, why do we study stories? Here is me.
Okay.
Here's you. Here's you.
Me.
Here's. This is a very bad diagram. I'm not that big, but okay, that's us, right? Yeah, and we each got our own experiences, right? You are 16 years old, so you got 15?
We have 15.
Oh, sorry. You're 15? And then you're 16? Yeah, so we all got our own experiences. That's our experiences, right?
Okay.
And then here is a text that you read.
Oh, dear.
Right. Now, in this text, what do we say? It reveals experiences. Whose experiences?
Authors.
Yeah, partially the authors, right? And so, let's draw a diagram where this is the author.
Okay.
Authors, they seem very highly, like a nice hat. But the author, right? And so the author also has their own experiences. That's their own experiences, right? And this is the book that was made by that author. And so the author took some of their own experiences into this book. So now this book has kind of like a subsection of experiences from that author, right? Now, what we're missing here is the word perspective. What is perspective?
How you understand something.
how you see something, right? How you view something, how you view the world, typically, right? In different parts of the world, right? For example, let's say this is the world, right? This is me, and I view the world from this way. Let's say I don't view all of the world, right? I can't see all of the world. I don't have every perspective of the world. I only see a part of it. And so I only see this much of the world, let's say, right? And then you from your own experiences, you will see the world a bit differently because you had your own experiences. So you might see like that much, and there'll be a difference that I don't see your perspective kind of thing, right? And so for you as well, you will see like a different perspective, and then, okay, 4 people is a bit too much. But main idea is we all have our own perspective upon the world, right? And so the author also has their own perspective on the world, kind of thing. And so why is perspective important here? Why is it, we all know that we should have more perspectives, right? Why?
It helps us understand.
Yeah, it kind of helps us understand the world around us better. And so we can like avoid stereotypes, avoid the consequences of, let's say, racism, because we know that racism does this and that, and so now we can avoid it kind of thing. Like, let's say bullying. Let's say if you were a kid back then, you didn't learn about bullying. You're like, oh, I have to bully these kids. And you grow up and you learn, you get a new perspective that, oh, bullying is bad because it hurts them. That's a new perspective. Before, let's say this kid had this small view, loved bullying. And then he read a book about bullying, or some parents told him, and now he enlarged the parent told him bullying is bad, stop it. The parent basically put her perspective, sorry, I don't know why she was her, but let's say it's a mum,
Okay.
put her perspective about bullying being bad into him, and then now he has an enlarged perspective about how now bullying is bad. Do you see what I'm trying to say here, right? Stories are just one of the ways that we can improve or broaden our perspective upon the world and then help change our actions and make the world a better place kind of thing, right? And so, back to stories, right? When we analyze stories, we're trying to get a deeper meaning from it, right? This is a story, and we're trying to understand the story, right? When you first read a book, right? Let's say you read Harry Potter, right? When you first read Harry Potter, on the first read, do you think that you would... Wait, have you read Harry Potter? Have you read Harry Potter?
Oh my god.
Unfortunately, you should read Harry Potter, it's pretty good. Main point here is, when you first read something, when you first read a book, or like even a movie, let's say you watch Truman Show, right? When you first read or watch something, you know what the plot is, you know what's happening in the story, but you might not know the full point of the story, the full purpose of the story, the full experiences, the full thing about the story, right? What is it touching on? In the Truman Show, you see the main character realizing that his world is collapsing, right? He lives in a fake world, right? When you first watch that, you're like, okay, that's cool, right? Let's say this is your first watch of the text. You got this. I really shouldn't have used 4 people. Hold on.
Oh man.
This is you, and this is the Truman Show, right? You watch the text, right? And then now you know about the text and how the plot works and everything. And we can say that maybe your perspective upon the world has now increased a bit more, right? Let's say, from watching that text. But did you know what was the point of the Truman Show? What was it critiquing? Have you heard of consumerism? About how, why do they have advertisements in the movie all the time out of nowhere? You know why? Right? And so there's a lot more to the show than we would actually know. Because in the movie, The Truman Show, they have advertisements to critique it because it seems like they're trying to critique how in society right now, we're always seeing advertisements everywhere. And it's become like a normal thing where every object is an advertised. It has a monetary value. It's become so detached. And so if you analyze the story and dig deep upon it, going back upon it, looking at the film again, asking yourself, why has this been the case? You will then learn a bit more about the story. You'd figure out the full point of the story, right? Because when you first read the story, you only probably got like, let's say that much % of the story, right? And you only got that much increase of perspective from the story. But if you analyzed it, right, you would get a bit more, and a bit more, and a bit more. Who knows, maybe you might get all of it, right? You learn more from the text, and then that will then increase, as you learn more from the text, it will then increase your own perspective upon the world a bit more. And so now your perspective is now this much bigger. It's now this big. Rather than being only that big before, right? Because you analyze the text and you got more from it, right? Now, with poems, something different here with poems. With poems, which is very few lines, right? A poem, it doesn't give you everything, right? A poem is always like one stanza. It's like very brief description, right? A novel would go into deep about the character, what they look like, what's their name, what are their behaviors, what are they wearing, right? But a poem will just give you like a small brief kind of like touch upon what they're doing, right? The leaves rustled, the flick of the hair. It's very small, right? And so, what is the point of that? What's the effect of that? How does it compare in terms of, in contrast to like a novel or a film?
It gets the point across faster, maybe.
How so? Point across faster.
Because they're usually in abstract terms, it forces you to think deeper.
Okay, yeah. So with a poem, since it's so abstract, it makes us think deeper, right? Because when you first read a poem, you're like, what the hell is this poem? And think more about it again and again and again. And so with a poem, it forces us to think about it and be like a detective, trying to figure out the meaning behind it, right? Whereas compared to a novel or a film, you can just sit there, watch the whole thing, and you kind of understand most of it already. You don't feel any incentive to research it your own, right? And so with a poem, what a poem does is that it forces you to actively think about it yourself more. The poem forces you to attribute your own meaning to it a lot more. And in that sense, the poem forces you to use your own experiences and apply it to the text, right? Before, it was primarily just the text, just telling you what's happening, right? But with a poem, it forces you to use your own experiences, your own perspective upon the world, and apply it to help understand what this text is about. And so in that sense, that's where the mirroring comes in, right? A poem, you can say, acts as a mirror more so than other forms of text because it forces you to reflect upon yourself more. When you see a mirror, you see yourself, right? When you see a poem, you have to try to figure out the meaning a lot more. And in that sense, when you try to figure out the meaning a lot more, you have to put your own experiences into it. And you're seeing yourself in that sense. And so a poem is unique in that it serves a bit more like a mirror than others, kind of thing. That's pretty cool. And that's my main point I'm trying to get across, right? So you see how like the thing you said about how we are all stories, we are all storytellers, right? All of these experiences are basically different stories interwoven within another, right? You have a story of how you got your first toy car. You got a story about how you first brushed your teeth. You got a story about how you beat up Jimmy, let's say, right? We are all made up of individual stories, right? And it's up to us whether we want to put it into an actual story or not, right? But either way, we are still storytellers in that sense, right? And what stories do is that they allow us to connect to other people, like how the author is connected to us, even though they're like dead, let's say, through the story. Like we're being connected like that, right? And then with the poem, we are being a mirror more so because the poem doesn't have enough information as much as other ones. And so we have to figure out the meaning. And to figure out the meaning, we have to draw from our own experiences. In that sense, it's more of a mirror than other forms of mediums.
Can you summarize that?
Summarize that. Well, I got it from him because like he say your 3 quotes again. I'll write it out. You got like we are all storytellers.
Yeah.
We.
1 second. Oh, I'm blind. Where is it?
Or to represent another person is to build a bridge between their world and ours. And
Wait. What's the first one?
oh no, the first one is we are storytellers, and the second one is
Yeah.
to represent another person is to build a bridge between their world and ours.
To represent
Another person
another person
is to build a bridge
is to build a bridge
between their world and ours.
between their world and ours.
And the last one, a mirror does not just reflect what is seen.
The mirror does not just reflect what is seen.
It reveals
Yeah,
what is hidden.
it reveals what is hidden. Okay. I didn't really touch on this idea.
Oh, I
What
like
is
this
hidden?
idea.
Yeah. What do you think about the quote? What is hidden?
Hmm?
What do you think about it? Why do you like it?
Which one? 5.
Three. That's
Three.
it. Sorry. Maybe three.
Provokes reflection
Mm-hmm.
upon what you see when you look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Or maybe I should say what other people and yourself might see. Like the differences between how you perceive yourself versus how other people perceive yourself, maybe?
Yeah. So like I guess if you're insecure about your nose, for example, when you look in the mirror you might see your nose a lot more. Whereas someone who's insecure about the hair might see the hair a lot more. Or someone who likes big muscles might see the muscles a lot more. We all see different parts of ourselves, even though we're all the same thing objectively. Is kind of the main premise. But the mirror does not just reflect what is seen, it reveals what is hidden. How does that fare in terms of poetry? How does poetry reveal what is hidden? You wanna give it a shot? No clue. Yeah. Even a one word answer. Chuck me a keyword you think you can't put into words. So poetry, yeah.
Different perspective of how you see yourself.
Yeah. How does that relate to poetry form in terms of how they have very little detail compared to other forms of text? Since it has so little detail, we're forced to like embrace.
No, like think more like.
Yeah, we're forced to think more, and so think more, and then see how does it relate to reveal what is hidden. If we think more, then by thinking more, then we're forced to think beyond the surface level ideas. Normally, right? Because poetry typically have what? Similes and metaphors, right? They speak very metaphorically, very figuratively, right? So rather than saying, this is a cat, they're like, oh, but then the cat represents, 9 lives. And so then they use 9 lives instead, let's say, right? They talk very figuratively. But in doing so, what does that do then in the poem? It forces you to think more to understand it, right? Compared to a novel or a film. And in that sense, by making you think more and try to figure out the meaning, you then put your own meaning into it. And then by you putting your own meaning into it, it might reveal what is then hidden from your typical everyday understanding of the world, right? Because in films and novels, most of them, they just tell you everything. And so you can just read it and then move on to the next one. Whereas poems, you're forced to sit there, think about it, question what these like metaphorical language is about, and then in doing so you reach for more different ideas you wouldn't have ever thought of before, right? And in that sense, since you haven't thought of it before, that is what is hidden, because you haven't thought about it before.
So basically, what is hidden is a new idea or something like that.
Kind of thing, right? It's like looking beyond the surface, right? This is your iceberg, right? Here's your
Here we go.
cat, and you want to look beyond the surface, and so you're forced to like view deeper about like the deeper meanings behind the cat, let's say, right? And so that's what a poem does. It forces you to look deeper for that hidden meaning, a deeper truth, maybe, right? Yeah. Anyway, that's the main thing. The reason why this seems very abstract and kind of useless, but for English, this is very important to understand and wrap your head around, to understand and make your essays have this kind of idea underneath it, because a lot of questions that they give you will test you on these kind of ideas, right? They'll give you a stimulus like this: we are storytellers, right? If you never thought about it like this, you might be like confused on like how are we storytellers, right? A lot of the English questions you get are very figurative quotes like this, and having this kind of idea about how stories work and why we analyze it will really help you to answer any question that give you these kind of abstract questioning or stimulus quotes. And so it is actually very important to have this down, because once you have this down, you then realize why you're even doing what you're doing, right? It's not just like, oh, I need to memorize this essay to get this mark. It's more so, I memorize this essay, but then I also know that by doing this essay, I learn more about this kind of thing. It kind of motivates you as well. And so this idea is really important to like know at the start of your like English learning journey kind of thing, because it sets up the why, right? You don't just do something for no reason. You like a robot. You do it because there's a reason for it. If your only reason to do English is to get marks, then you're not going to be very motivated to do so, unless you can see a bigger why for it. And that's why this why is so important. Anyways, that's what happened. Any questions about this?
Can you like summarize all of that?
Summarize all of that? Well, think about the question, why we even analyze stories or study stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to start with the story. So start with the story. This is a story. Poems, text, a poem, films, novels, they all are stories, right? Why are stories important? Stories are important because they give us experiences and perspectives from someone else that we don't know, that we don't have our own experience of. And so by doing that, we can then broaden our own perspective upon the world. And the reason why broadening our perspective upon the world is so important is because a lot of the injustices and evil that's happening in the world is due to a limited perspective, a narrow perspective, right? The example I gave before, bullying is okay because I'm having fun. That could be a reflection of a narrow mindset, and you didn't realize the pain you're giving to the other person, right? Maybe because you don't realize the amount of pain that the person is going through in terms of bullying, right? When you bully someone, that person feels bad, right? When you're a kid, you don't really see many perspectives yet. You still have a very small, narrow perspective on the world, your own small experiences, right? And when you might not realize that they feel really bad and they feel really sad, right? Until you go up to them, you talk to them, and you hear about their pain, right? And then you feel empathy for them. And then that way you might now stop bullying, right? But what led to that? It led to you talking to them. And you talking to them is that perspective broadening. When you talk to someone else, you get their perspective and it comes into your own, right? And so in that way, texts give us that alternative. We don't have to literally speak to that person anymore. We can just speak through their text. We see their text, right? And so a text becomes like a substitute for that person to understand their perspective, right? Humans have been a lot alive and been writing stories, I think, for like, I don't know, a long ass time, 2,000 years, 3,000 years, right? Texts allow us to take those different ideas throughout 2,000 years and talk to them again and again, and broaden our perspective. And that's very important because history often repeats itself. We often fall into the same trap about wars. We continue going to wars. You always hear about how war is bad, but then we still go into wars. Why? Because one of the reasons why is because the people in power, they don't see, we can say one of the reasons why war continues is because the soldiers who are actually in the war, don't realize that they're sometimes being manipulated just to further an agenda for their country, to fight for their country. And they're going around to kill other people but they don't know why they're killing other people. They're just going there because they need to do the country proud. But that's an issue for another day. Main thing is, when we analyze text, when we analyze it, and also not just reading it firsthand, when we analyze, sit down and think about it, we then are able to use the experiences and perspectives of the author to then broaden our own perspective upon the world and then make better decisions based upon that. That's a neat summary for you. Yeah. And it's important you have this kind of understanding because this is literally what all English is about. And so a lot of the questions will be based upon this kind of concept of understanding. Yeah. For homework, I want you to draw your own kind of diagram of this and then explain it. All right, for homework. I want that next week. I'll go around looking at you guys. Actually, no, I'll ask you to teach me it. That'll be hard. Any questions about this before? Because if not, I'm not gonna say it again. And if you can't tell me about it, teach me next week. I'm gonna look at you badly. Any questions before we go? Honestly. Make sure you understand it. Any parts that seem confusing? Yeah? All good? Alright, we'll move on. How long was that? 26 minutes. Okay.
It's
Ask me now, bro.
Yeah, what about the second?
This one?
Yeah.
To represent another person is to build a bridge between their world and ours. So, to represent another person, this is in the context of a story, right? To represent another person through a story is to build a bridge between their world and ours, right? So, their world and ours is crucial here, their world. In terms of this diagram, what do you think that is, their world?
Like their perspective.
Yeah, basically, right? It's basically their experiences and the perspective upon the world, right? So honestly, if you were given this question, this quote, what you could do to show a better response to the question, a more sophisticated, nuanced response to it, is instead of saying, instead of repeating the idea that it builds a bridge between their world and ours, you can say what it does is not build a bridge between their world and ours, but a bridge from which we can see how they viewed their world in contrast to our view upon the world. Do you see that distinction there, right? If you can do those type of distinctions in your response to questions and quotes like that, that will land you much higher mark. Because it shows that you not only understand what it's saying, but you understand the more deeper insight into it. And that's why it's important to understand this, because a lot of these quotes will give you little itty bitty parts of this, right? But if you can understand the whole thing, then you can then build upon nearly any quote that's given to you in a much more distinct and nuanced way. And this probably isn't all of it. There's probably more to this than what I just taught you now, but this is what I got so far. But yeah, does that make sense? So the bridge between their world and ours, it's the text, right? It's this part, right? This text represents this person or their whatever other person they wrote about in that book, right? And they put their world into the book, and then when we read it, we see their experiences we see all of this, right? Well, maybe a bit of it, a part of it, right? And then that will then help build upon and expand our own perspective upon the world, right? So let's say at first your perspective upon the world was only this big, and then you read this text, and then it expands it again by this much. Let's say instead of reading, you analyze it, right? It expands it kind of thing. And so to represent another person is to build a bridge between their world and ours. When you want to represent a group of people, let's say the marginalized people, right? Typically in America, you see about how black people have only recently gotten their rights back kind of thing, right? And so to represent those people, those black people in America, they didn't have much representation to begin with, right? They weren't really represented that much because it was mainly the dominant white population, right? And what that does is that it silences that representation, right? And then one way to help bring back the representation is to have more stories about those people, right? One of the reasons why slaves were such a big thing for like a long ass time was because one of the reasons is because people sometimes viewed the slaves as not on the same level as them. They saw them as inferior because they're different skin color, we're white, we're pure, and they're black, they're evil, right? That's typically the mindset they had back then. They saw it that way because there wasn't enough representation about them as a people, right? When you're a white person back in those times, right, you see a lot of other stories about your people. You see about how this one person was a cook. You see about how Shakespeare was a playwright. You hear about how the Crucible. Oh, yeah, I don't know if it's Crucible, but like you see more stories about your color, and so you see your people as more human. You see a lot more. But compared to like the black person who you already deem as like evil, you don't see many stories about them, and so you continue thinking that they're evil, that they're worse, you're better than them, right? Because you don't see any other story beside that, right? Because your perspective upon the world is so limited to that white privilege idea. You never heard any stories from the person of color and their stories. You didn't see any of their perspective upon the world, right? All of this perspective from the colored people, it's not there. You don't get access to it. You don't see this side of the world. You don't see the pain of being a slave. You don't see how it feels to be completely ignored as a human being. You don't see their suffering, right? Or exacerbate suffering. And so what texts do, texts allow us to represent this person. This person can then make a text, a story or a poem, like the poem, the Shame one, right? They make a text, and then this text can then now be read by us. And so we don't need to see the person or talk to the person directly to get their perspective. We can now just read their text to get a bit of their perspective. And in that sense, this creates a bridge between us, between the people and us. That's the bridge. And in that sense, once we read the text and we think about it more, we then get to see this perspective that we have missed out a bit more. And so you might say, perspective now enlarged to include this part of the world, right? You now see their suffering. You now see how it feels to be a slave in this text. And so that is kind of what that quote's all about, I'd say. This is all subjective at the same time. I could be wrong. But this is one way to look at it that I think is useful for English. Yeah. Any more questions about that? But
Can you go back to poetry for a second and tell me how exactly it shows hidden meanings again?
hidden meanings. So poetry as a form, it's very abstract, right? It doesn't explain everything to you directly like a novel does. It doesn't go into a character that well, into like, let's say the costume, what they wear, how old they are. And so there's no distinct character typically in a poem. And so in that sense, it's more easily generalized, right? If you only describe a character by their blue eyes, right, let's say, then a lot more blue-eyed people can see themselves in that text, right? As opposed to if it was a novel where you just have blue eyes, I don't know, big lips, I don't know, big muscles, then it's less easy to then see yourself in that text as well, right? You can't see yourself in the text that much anymore. You can't see your own, it doesn't reflect you that much anymore. But since it's only like a few details, blue eyes, there's a lot more people who can then relate to it, who can reflect themselves in it, and that's the mirror, right?
Okay, so more people relate and reflect to it.
Yeah, and then the other part with a poem is that it's not, so like there's two things. One is that it's not much detail, and then the other thing is that it uses a lot of figurative language, meaning it's not easy to understand, not easy to understand. And when it's not easy to understand, what does it do? It forces
you think harder.
Yeah, makes you think more. Think more. Right? Think more like a detective, trying to figure out the meaning behind it. And when you think more, trying to figure out the meaning behind it, you would have to even think about something, you're already drawing from your own experiences. for me to think about 2 plus 2 right now, I'm drawing from my experience that I learned 2 plus 2 equals 4. I drew from that. 3 plus 3, 7. I was wrong. I drew from my experience, right? They're all from my experience. And so when you think more about something in a poem, just to try to figure out the meaning, you are drawing from your own experiences. And since it writes the story in a very figurative way, so instead of a cat, it might say 9 lives, it makes you question things as well. Question things that you might have otherwise not realized that you had. Experiences that you may have never recognized, right? Let's say this is like your whole experience, right? But then this experience might be something that you never thought about before. Maybe, if we use the 9 lives of the cat example, let's say you read a poem about 9 lives, a cat, right? And then at first you don't understand what the hell's happening. But then you might say, oh, 9 lives, a cat has 9 lives, that's so cool. I want 9 lives. And you might try to figure out some more meaning behind it. And then at the end of it, you're like, oh, what if cats do have 9 lives? Or like, we only have 1 life, and when a cat has 9 lives, that makes our life so much more important. Bam! Right? You might go to small, you might then reflect upon your life a bit more, right? Damn, we only have 1 life. That's important, right? That is something you never thought of before, right? And so in that sense, it reveals what is hidden because it makes you think a lot more deeply or a lot more abstractly, right? Cat to 9 lives. It makes you reflect upon different things now. And so let's say now when you see a cat, you don't think, oh, it's a cat, I want to pet him. You might say, oh, I want to pet him, but damn, it has 9 lives, I only have 1 life. Wish I had more. Makes my life so much more important, right? That changed how you behave now. When you see a cat, you don't just think about a cat being there anymore and feeding the cat. You might think, oh, I should take care of my life a bit more because of that, right? And so do you see how that tangibly changes how you view the world? Yeah. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So main thing, poems, not much detail, and it's very figurative. And that's the main thing that separates it from other forms of text. Yeah. I think it's very cool. I'm pretty proud of myself.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yeah? How much time is it? 7:02. Okay. Took probably like 40 minutes doing all that. But I think it's really important though. I think this will help you a lot.